什么有民族性。The first the sentence I read. Now my broken English, the pronunciation may not be correct. At least not American pronunciation. With our thoughts, we make our world. Our mind is central and precedes our deeds. Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness will follow you. Like a shadow that never leaves. The second sentence. 지진 대신 올리자. 누는 대신 칩니다. 대례를 주고도 이런 데 군주쇼. May there be joy in the world, with bountiful harvest and spiritual wealth. May every good fortune come to be, and may all our wishes be fulfilled. 지신한가 내봐도 로 지신 내주고 지지도 않는 내주는데 로에 동에 세워쇼. This is my favorite prayer. Daily I pray this. That gives me inner strength. So enthusiasm to serve sentient being, humanity on this one. As long as space remains, and as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain and help dispel the misery of the world. Thank you.
Please join me in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
It's my pleasure to welcome to the United States Senate His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. I know I speak for the entire Senate family when I express our gratitude for the prayer held in the Senate and his words of encouragement and his blessing. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is well known throughout the world as a spiritual leader of the Tibetan people and for spreading the gospel of peace, compassion, and love of our fellow human beings. But it's tradition when the United States Senate welcomes a guest chaplain to say a few words about the honored guest. My friendship with His Holiness has roots from a good man from California by the name of Richard Blum, who has done more to, in my opinion, to help the Tibetan people and His Holiness than anyone else. His Holiness often says that he's only a simple monk, born to a farming family in northeastern Tibet. But to millions of people in Tibet and across the globe, he is much more. He's a source of hope and inspiration in a world that can sometimes seem very dark. When he was only 2 years old, His Holiness was recognized as reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama. 4 years later, when he was just a little boy, he began his monastic education. He studied logic, art, Tibetan culture, and Buddhist philosophy, among many other things. At age 23, he passed his exams with honors and was awarded what we would call, would be an equivalent of a PhD, a doctorate of Buddhist philosophy. For more than half a century, the Dalai Lama has been traveling the world, raising awareness about the concerns of 6 million fellow Tibetans, as he would say, making new friends around the world. In Tibetan Buddhist philosophy, the Dalai Lama, all of them are enlightened beings who have postponed their own nirvana, or liberation from the cycle of reincarnation, in order to serve humanity. This particular enlightened being has chosen to serve humanity by spreading a message of peace. He motivates countless people around the world, people of every faith, to practice compassion toward one another. His Holiness urges us all to be kind, and these are his words, be kind whenever possible. And he says it is always possible. The Dalai Lama's teachings contain lessons for people around the world, and certainly within this chamber. His Holiness also advises us, and this is a quote, the best way to resolve any problem in the human world is for all sides to sit down and talk. End of quote. Pretty simple, but very true. It's advice that those of us fortunate enough to serve our country and our constituents in the Senate should take heart and follow. And the presence of His Holiness in this chamber today inspires me, as I hope it does all of us, to renew our commitment to speak and act with a pure mind, help dispel the misery of the world. Mr. President, I now move to proceed to counter number 309.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to counter number 309 as 1086, a bill to reauthorize and improve the Child Care and Development Block Grant Act of 1990 and for other purposes.
Following my remarks and those of the Republican leader, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 10:30, with the Republicans controlling the first half, majority the final half. Following that morning business, the Senate will proceed to executive session at 11:20. There will be up to 3 roll call votes on executive nominations. Following those votes, there will be 2 hours of debate on the military sexual assault bills. At about 2 p.m., there will be a series of roll call votes in relation to military sexual assaults. We also expect to consider additional executive nominations, which may require votes later today.
Mr. President.
The senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, I ask consent to be able to continue as in morning business for about 3 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I feel honored to be a member of the United States Senate and to be President pro tempore this morning when I was able to introduce to the Senate an old and dear friend, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Marcel and I have been friends of His Holiness for decades, and we count that as a great treasure. Just as I saw Senator Feinstein earlier on the floor, another longtime friend with her husband of His Holiness. Mr. President, I watched him for so many years, his representation of the Tibetan people. He's joined on the floor by another Buddhist, Senator Hirono of Hawaii, and the gracious comments of Senator Reid reflect how people feel about him. I think of how the faith of his people are moved, and I've told His Holiness this story. When I walked through the streets of Lhasa, Tibet, years ago, and a man holding a small child saw me, pointed to my camera, and held up a picture of His Holiness. He was risking being imprisoned for having that, but he insisted I take this picture. I did. I've given that photograph to His Holiness, and I've told him the story that when we asked the man, why did he risk prison to show the picture of His Holiness, he said, because people have to know. The world have to know the great faith of the Tibetan people, and their longing for the autonomy they deserve to practice their faith. Fortunately, they have as a symbol of that faith the Dalai Lama, the Nobel Peace Prize recipient, a man who touches everybody's conscience. He touches this Catholic every time I see him. It goes beyond whatever faith you are. He is a gift to the world, and I am so honored to have been able to introduce him here today. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence.
Mr. President, no, hold that.
Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, with His Holiness here in the Senate chamber, there are a number of senators who would like to say hello to him, and on that I ask that the Senate go into a quorum call until We'll recess subject to the call of the chair. I ask consent to do that.
Without objection, recess subject to the call of the chair.